Deputy Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu. The bone of contention is Sanatan Dharma. Pawan Kalyan has advised Stalin Jr., who is really junior to him by age and experience, not to malign or abuse Sanatan Dharma as he's done in the past. Remember, Stalin Jr. had got into a bit of a hot pickle some months ago when he compared Sanatan Dharma to dengue and cholera and how it needs to be eradicated. Pawan Kalyan has also issued an ominous warning saying that Hindus will not tolerate any kind of slander or abuse of Sanatan Dharma. Stalin Jr., who's just now been elevated just in the last few days to Deputy Chief Minister and most likely to succeed his father, Chief Minister M.K. Stalin, as and when he hangs up his boots, he has now responded by saying, and again, pretty coded language being used here, wait and we shall see. Separately, the Supreme Court today, hearing the Tirupati laddu matter in what seems like a blow to the Andhra Pradesh government, has constituted a special central team with oversight by the CBI director, including two CBI officers, two officers from the Andhra Pradesh police, as well as one member from the FSSAI, to take a look at whether the Tirupati laddus were actually made with adulterated ghee. The court did not take a particularly kind view of the Chief Minister, Chandrababu Naidu, jumping the gun and coming to a conclusion even before the state government appointed SIT had come to a conclusion. But first, let's bring you the story of how it is turning out to be, as I said, the war of the two deputy chief ministers in Andhra Pradesh and in Tamil Nadu, and how they are racing to claim or shape this whole debate around Sanatan Dharma.
Anyone tries to wipe out Sanatana Dharma, let me tell you, from the feet of Lord Balaji, you will be wiped out.
Let's wait and see. Let's wait and see.
And the honorable opposition leader, Sri Rahul Gandhi says, Ayodhya ceremony, where he compares to it as a Nachigan Sabha. None of the Sanatani Hindus should not get hurt. We have to be happy about it. And you want the votes of all the Sanatani Hindus to get into the power, to be a political leader, to be in the opposition.
All right, so is this going to reshape the entire debate around Sanatan Dharma in southern India now that the two deputy chief ministers have crossed swords in Andhra Pradesh and in Tamil Nadu respectively? Deepak Reddy is national spokesperson of the Telugu Desam Party. T.K. Silangovan, senior leader of the DMK, is now joining us. Sumansi Raman, author and analyst, joining us from Chennai, and Tushar Gupta, senior journalist, also joining us. Let me start with Mr. T.K. Silangovan. So, you know, your leaders, and particularly the Deputy Chief Minister, the newly appointed Deputy Chief Minister, has been going on about Sanatan Dharma. He had said a few months ago that Sanatan Dharma is like cholera and dengue, it needs to be eradicated. The matter went up to the court, and the court had particularly not so charitable things to say to him. The accusation against the DMK, including the latest one from Pawan Kalyan, is that you are despising majority followers of the majority religion in this country, and you expect their votes to come to power. How do you respond, Mr. Ilangovan?
See, DMK is in its 75th year. What we had said during 1949 when the party was started, we are continuing with it. I don't know what is the meaning of Sanatana Dharma. Is it an equality by birth of the people of this country? And they accuse us of being anti-Hindu. The one thing I can say is that the only movement which was formed in Tamil Nadu, in the South India, for the sake of for the welfare of the Hindus, that is backward classes and Dalits. They were not given education, they were not given employment, they were not even allowed to enter into any temple. The Dravidian movement was started way back in 1916 to give education to the Hindus, Hindu backward classes and Hindu scheduled castes. It was formed to give employment to the Hindu backward classes and Hindu scheduled castes. We are continuing with that. We are not against Hindu people. We are against certain Hindu principles which had earlier denied them education and
No,
employment.
Mr. Ilangovan, there
which
are two,
had
no, one
made
second.
them
There
a
are two
slave.
separate issues, if I may, please. There are two separate issues. Sanatan means eternal. It is eternal. It is ageless. It is timeless. And Dharma, of course, is,
What is
a certain set of beliefs. Now, one second. Let me just finish. So, Sanatan Dharma, as you have elucidated, has nothing to do with the caste system. That is Varnashrama Dharma, which is a certain set of, certain people are employed in certain professions and so on. That has nothing to do with Sanatan Dharma or the phrase Sanatan Dharma or the belief system that is Sanatan Dharma, which means eternal, ageless, timeless truths. Now, my point is, the followers of Sanatan Dharma, by the utterances of your leaders, are getting offended because, as Pawan Kalyan said and as your leader said, you're comparing it to, dengue and cholera and it needs to be eradicated and so on. Surely some people find that offensive. A lot of people find that offensive.
No, I can understand that. That is the feeling of a certain section of the people who are against the Dravidian movement. And we are for the people, particularly for the Hindu people, who are Dalits and scheduled castes and backward classes. So, what is Sanatana Dharma? What is eternal? That is what my question is. The word is found in Manu Dharma. What is eternal as per Manu Dharma? You tell me. It may be a separate issue. It may not be Manu Dharma. But the term Sanatana Dharma takes place in Manu Dharma. What is Manu Dharma? It is the difference of the people by birth. Classification of people based on their birth, which is what we are opposing, which is what we say that it is wrong. All human beings are equal. What our Thiruvalluvar said was, all men are born equal.
Okay.
That is what we are questioning. Nobody had explained as to what is eternal Dharma. What is eternal Dharma?
So,
There must be something. What is eternal?
will explain.
Zaka,
Suman Raman, yeah.
the hilarious part is, Mr. Udayanithi Stalin has just established that he is superior by birth over the rest of those in his party. So they are practicing Sanatana Dharma, which they want to eradicate. So I don't think you should take them very seriously. He is superior by birth over all those who have worked for 40, 50 years for the party. Purely by the basis of birth, he has become deputy chief minister in 4 years after entering politics. So what are we talking about? Leave the hypocrisy aside. First of all, both sides need a diversion. Mr. Udayanithi Stalin needs a diversion to deflect from the fact that the charge of nepotism and the charge of dynastic succession is coming into him. Pawan Kalyan needs a diversion because they've goofed big time with the charge on the laddu issue, which they don't seem to have enough evidence to back up. So both Pawan Kalyan needs a diversion, Udayanithi Stalin needs a diversion, and today here we are on national television discussing a complete non-issue.
No, one second. Dr. Raman, I agree with a lot of things that you say, but on this, let's just analyze this threadbare, right? You are saying that Udayanithi Stalin wants to run away from this whole dynastic politics issue. He can't, unbirth his birth. He is born to whoever he is born to. He's the son of Mr. Stalin and the son of Ms. Durga. He can't undo that. And as you said, by virtue of that, he is now deputy chief minister. I don't think that's politically costly in a state where, Jayalalitha back in the 90s, had this elaborate wedding for her foster son and still managed to come back to power 5 years after that. One second. Let me finish, please. Yeah. You are talking about a state where Mr. Mupanar's son forms his own party, Mr. Vijaykant's son is the heir of his own party. Jayalalitha, unfortunately, that debate is still open in the AIDMK because she didn't have any progeny. Had she had any progeny, I don't think the AIDMK would have been split three ways as it is today. So to say that dynastic politics and Udayanithi needs a diversion from dynastic politics, I don't think so. I don't think that certainly the history of Tamil Nadu doesn't bear itself out.
In fact, the charge which has been made against the DMK is exactly this. In fact, even now, Mr. Ilangovan only said that some are superior by birth. We don't accept that. Now, please tell me on what basis a gentleman who is exactly less than 5 years old in politics, in a party which is celebrating its 75th year, in which many of the senior leaders have put in 50 years for the party, has been elevated as deputy chief minister.
No, that is not
it
the
because of
material
any-
of the debate tonight. The material of the debate tonight is why are certain leaders, and you would imagine after his elevation now, he's virtually the number 2 in the party. Why
Yes.
are they hell bent on degrading, denigrating a certain section of people who have a certain set of faith, ideals, and beliefs, and so on?
They have always
whereas they
been
wouldn't
doing
say
that.
the same. They wouldn't say the same of followers of Islam or Christianity or
No,
Buddhism
they
or
are the vote
Jainism.
bank. See, let us be very clear, Zaka. The Dravidian movement has been saying this for ever since the movement started. Like Mr. Ilangovan said, it is not the first time they are talking about destroying Sanatan Dharma.
Okay.
They have been saying the same thing for 60 years, 70 years. In fact, there was a point of time when the precursors to the Dravidian party, which is the DK and others, used to carry out, used to beat idols of gods with chappals. So
Okay.
this is the kind of movement. It is actually
So-
a kind of a hate.
So you are
movement.
saying
Yeah.
that is their political belief system, and it has not cost them politically. It has worked
And they
for
will
them,
not dare say
and
it
they will
against
not change
minority
that.
because they get
Okay.
99% of the minority
Okay,
vote.
let
So
me
they will not
let me
dare
ask
say
Deepak
anything about
Reddy.
minority.
So that is the response that Mr. Pawan Kalyan can say whatever he wants to say. Udayanidhi Stalin says, "Let's wait and see," almost like an ominous sort of coded message that whatever Mr. Kalyan has to say will not work in Tamil Nadu. And I just want to read out vote share, despite all this controversy, by the way. Your ally, which is a relevant political party, the BJP in Tamil Nadu, seat share 2024 Lok Sabha 0. Seat share 2019 Lok Sabha 0. Vote share 2019 Lok Sabha 3.62. Vote share 2024 Lok Sabha 11.24. So, Mr. Reddy, after all this noise and national debates around it, fact is that politically you or your allies are not able to draw benefit out of it.
Zaka, that's true. If you look at the history of Tamil Nadu, this is the strategy what this party has been adopting for a long time. So, getting people lost on the basis of this caste, and they are one of the most corrupt people you can find in this country. So, to divert that, they have been successfully playing this politics all along. Unfortunately, the people haven't realized. And now, in this day of information age, I think they are coming to realize this shortly. But we Andhra Telugu people have realized their psychopathic mindset and said we want a separate state. We don't want to be part of the Madras presidency, and we formed a separate state. We understood their mindset very early on after independence, and we broke away. So let's come to a couple of things what Pawan Kalyan said. What he was telling is, law is very harsh and merciless when it comes to Sanatana Dharma, but people of other religions, law is very humane and kind. If somebody says Sanatana Dharma is virus, we will end it and talk in a derogative manner, the courts don't seem to bother. But when it comes to any comments made on Islam or any other religion, the courts get very active and they want to punish those people also. Why is this discriminatory practice in this country? For how long will Hindus be stamped upon is what his concern was. And he eloquently told a tiny little story which belongs to from our part of the country. A sage once cursed a cobra saying that don't bite people. And a few months later when he was passing by the same road, he asked the cobra, how's it going? The cobra said, every passerby throws a stone at me, including a tiny little child, because I don't bite. So the sage said, I asked you not to bite, but I didn't ask you to hiss and show your ferocity. So this is a story, what he told the Hindus, that, Hindus have to stand up for their rights, and we have to probably learn something from the Muslims as far as respecting their religion is concerned.
Okay.
So this kind of a language, what is being used by them is not just insulting, but it is unbelievable that they can even behave like that in this day of age. But I want to appeal to the people of Tamil Nadu that these guys are doing these dramas in politics, only diverting and they're the most corrupt people you can ever find. So Please understand this behind
Mr.
their
Reddy,
politics.
may I now turn the attention to the other issue, which is this whole Tirupati laddu controversy. And today the Supreme Court has constituted a CBI Director Oversight Committee, which will have 2 members from the CBI, 2 members from the Andhra Pradesh Police, 1 member from the FSSAI. Is this not a blow to the Andhra Pradesh state government, which, as the court said in its last order, was preemptive in jumping to a conclusion even before the SIT could investigate and come to a conclusion about the use of adulterated ghee? I mean, basically, the court has taken away powers from the SIT constituted by the state government and said, we don't believe in the impartiality of that investigative body, and now we want an investigative committee or a team which has central oversight.
Zaka, let me tell you one thing. The team was working hard, and in a short period, we would have got the report out. But in the meantime, the court has taken this decision. And our Chief Minister Chandrababu Naidu ji has tweeted and welcomed this decision. If the court feels you need a bigger diversity or people representing the food safety and people from CBI, we welcome it because we want to get to the bottom of this issue. So,
but does it also not show the court's lack of faith in the state government appointed SIT?
That is not true because of the falsification of facts by the YCP. The court thought it was sensitive and it is probably better to have a bigger body. And we welcome that. Even if the court didn't take the decision, our report would have come out in a week. Now, probably it will look fair, and we most welcome it. And our Chief Minister has clearly expressed that.
Tushar Gupta, so what then is at play here? As Sumant Raman says, is it a diversionary tactic because both parties could use one, whether it's the TDP and Pawan Kalyan? Because no matter how Mr. Reddy tries to spin it, the fact is that the Supreme Court has constituted a central government or CBI monitored probe. You could argue that it's because it doesn't have faith in the state government appointed SIT, so they would want a diversion. And of course, Udayanidhi Stalin, as Mr. Dr. Raman says, but I don't agree with him, Udayanidhi Stalin wants a diversion to take away from all of these allegations of dynastic politics and the fact that he has been chosen as Deputy Chief Minister only because of whose son he is.
Well, let's address it point by point, Saka. Number one, about Udayanidhi Stalin. Let's be very honest. He has been elevated to the position of the Deputy Chief Minister because what his family is, who is his father. It's that simple. I don't know why people like to run away from that reality. Starting with Udayanidhi Stalin himself. He is the son of a chief minister. He has been elevated to a certain position because of his entire family setup. This is nepotism. It happens in many states. I'm not trying to single out Udayanidhi Stalin here, but it is nepotism. It is political nepotism. It is what we see in Delhi. It is what we've seen in Punjab in the past. It is what we've seen in Himachal in the past. Tamil Nadu is no surprise, number one. Number two, about the investigation being given to the CBI. I think, Zaka, we must understand keeping the sensitivity in, factoring in the sensitivity of the issue. It's rather a blessing in disguise that it has gone to the CBI. Because had it been a state-monitored commission, it would have been another battleground for the local parties to play politics on. It would have worked out like that. So at the end of the day, given the sensitivity of the situation to millions and millions of Hindus across the country and across the world, it's important for the results to come out, for the verdict to come out. Number two. Number three, about the statement made by Pawan Kalyan. Now, I was listening to the DMK spokesperson. He said all people are equal. Can Udayanidhi Stalin, the comments he made last year, say the same thing about any other religion? I'm not saying he should. I'm saying would he? He wouldn't. And that's the right thing to do. But the problem is, Zaka, any time in this country, when someone makes a comment on any other religion other than Hinduism, everyone gets taken for a ride. I remember that one instance where a party spokesperson made some very objectionable remarks on national television, and the apex court said the anchors on television are a problem. People who are appearing on these debates are a problem. That's what the Supreme Court observation. So somewhere someone makes a comment on some religion which is not Hinduism, people like you and me get dragged by the apex court. Now you tell me, is that fair? There is a movie made on a certain religion, people defended in the name of freedom of speech and secularism. But if the same spokesperson or another spokesperson makes a comment on a different religion, it's an apex court problem. If there is a comedy group which makes a joke on a certain religion, they are forced to apologize before the priest or whoever the representatives of the religion are. But if the joke is made on Hinduism, it's the problem of freedom of speech. People need to accept it. People need to be free to such ideas. So Zaka, it's not something for the politicians alone to introspect on.
Okay.
It is something for the Hindu society also to introspect on. And I cannot deny that the Hindus in Tamil Nadu are voting for the DMK. They have voted for the DMK in the elections of 2024 after the statement made by Udinidhi Stalin. And as far as I remember, the DMK was defending that comment. Even today, they are defending that comment.
No, of course they have to defend. It's said by the Deputy Chief Minister of the state. It's said by the son of the Chief Minister. But that's besides the point. So let Mr. Elangovan respond on this. Again, Sumansi Raman also made this veiled allegation against your party that you are basically having different set of standards, Mr. Elangovan. When it comes to Hindus and Sanatan Dharmis, you feel okay and kosher that your leader, your Deputy Chief Minister can seemingly abuse them, saying it's cholera and dengue and it needs to be eradicated. But would he dare say the same thing about practitioners of Islam or Christianity or Buddhism or any other faith for that matter?
See, we are Hindus. We are by birth Hindus. We are fighting for the insult we were facing within this religion. What Periyar said when Ambedkar wanted all Dalit people to join Buddhism, Periyar said, no, we have to fight from within. This is our religion. We cannot be treated as untouchables. We have to fight from within. That is what we are doing. Why should we bother about other religion? We are Hindu, born Hindus. But we were insulted because of our birth or our community or class. That is what we are fighting against. Why should we talk about Christianity or Islam? There are 6 religions. In India, we have Buddhism, we have Jainism, we have Sikhism, we have Saivism, we have Vaishnavism. There are many religions in India, but this religion, this Hindu religion as it is called today, people born in this religion are facing these difficulties. So we are fighting.
No, but Mr.
There are no class difference in other religions.
There are two parts to it. Periyar fought against this, and his way of fighting against this was to destroy statues and to turn to atheism. Many of your leaders have been atheists. Kalyan Karunanidhi has been atheist. Aringan Anna has been atheist.
Yes.
To say that you are fighting from within, that's a bit, the Chief Minister himself is atheist. To say that you are born Hindus and fighting from within, that's not quite accurate, is it? So then what is the difference between you and the ADMK then?
We don't want to join Buddhism. We don't want to join Buddhism. Atheism was because, I will tell you one thing, why atheism was followed by Periyar. In Bhagavad Gita, there is a sentence that Chaturvanyam Maya Srishtam, the God has said. That is why he was against God. How can God divide its own people, his own people into
complete
classes?
the sentence.
Okay,
Complete the
Ms.
phrase.
Dr. Raman. And then Tushar after that,
Chaturvarnam
yeah.
Maya Srishtam Guna Karma Vibhagaha. That is the rest of the phrase. Guna Karma. Guna, it depends on it does not depend on your birth. In Gita, Lord Krishna says, I have created the 4 varnas based on the karma or the work which is done by the people and their innate good qualities, guna or karma. So they have cut out the second half and taking only the first half.
Okay. But Dr. Raman, before I go to Tushar, I need to wind down also the debate. But Dr. Raman, no, once again, you have to also answer the point that the DMK is making, whether it is untouchability, whether it is not allowing people of certain castes into temples, so on and so forth, whether it is appointing priests of certain castes. I mean, these are issues that they take up, whether you like it or not.
God, Zaka, you are not aware. There are daily there are instances where people are not being allowed into temples in Tamil Nadu. They say, quote unquote, dominant caste. DMK will not talk about them because they are vote bank. So let's be very clear. Day before yesterday, a Dalit lady died. Her body could not be taken for burial because it was passing through the main road where, quote unquote, dominant community, you won't name the community, dominant community did not allow us to say whether he saw it or not.
Tushar and then Mr. Reddy to close.
This is happening.
You know, Zaka, the DMK spokesperson just validated the point I made a couple of minutes back. He says we are fighting the differences, the differentiation that exists within the Hindu setup. Is he telling that there is no such differentiation, no such ethnic conflicts between Sikhs within the group of Sikhs? Does he not know that there are Dalit Sikhs? Does he not know that there are conflicting groups within Islam? Does he not know the foundations of the conflicts in Middle East which have been going on for centuries? This is my problem, Zaka. Everyone finds a free license to bash up Hinduism, but they do not like to talk about the other religions. Number two, and the final point. Can the DMK spokesperson tell me, as a born Hindu, in which definition of Hinduism were they being asked to say that Sanatan Dharma must be eradicated like dengue and cholera? Not differentiation, not reservation, but Sanatan Dharma as a whole they wanted to eradicate. What kind of a born Hindu
Okay,
is
Mr.
that?
Reddy, closing comment. I really need to wrap up in 30 seconds. Yeah, I need to move to the next one.
I mean, I'm very clear. This is purely politically motivated, and these people, the way they are talking, are something what probably might have happened there in 1940s or something. But we are living in 2024. This is a different India altogether. I was on the SC committee in Andhra Pradesh. If you see, the SC colonies are far more developed than other parts of the village. So they should stop dividing the people on the name of caste for their political gains. And it is time the people also realize that they should throw such corrupt and deviant minds out of politics.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much to all our guests. Let's see how this plays out. Like I said, politically, so far at least, we've not seen a downside for the DMK with the comments that Udayanithi made, or whether it is in the Lok Sabha election, whether it's in the assembly election, and of course there's going to be in 2026 the next set of assembly elections. I want to move on to the other big story. The world is waiting and watching with bated breath what Israel's response is going to be for the barrage of rocket attacks that we saw earlier this week from Iran into Israel, the first ever direct attack that we've seen since the formation of the Islamic Republic in 1979. The big question is, Israel has nuclear weapons. Iran is on the threshold of making a nuclear weapon. If this direct confrontation goes on, if neither side is able to get off the escalation ladder, will they cross each other's nuclear red line? In light of the Israeli attacks on Hezbollah in Lebanon, one question that has been constantly asked is, what will Israel do next? Especially in light of the ballistic missile attacks on mainland Israel by Iran Tuesday night. Israel could choose the conventional route, which is to directly attack Iran in some form of airstrikes, or choose to sit out off the escalation ladder. Israel, particularly under current Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu, is tempted to look at this moment as an opportune one to reshape and reconfigure the dynamics of the Middle East for the next 50 years. And for that to happen, Israel will have to do two things. One, convince enough number of Iranians to overthrow the Ayatollah regime, which has ruled over them since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. The other is to ensure that Israel does enough to set back the Iranian nuclear program by at least a decade or so. This is the great big variable in the evolving equations in the Middle East. And Israel realizes how much it needs to be able to leverage so as to shape a new Middle East. So the big question on Crux Decode is, will the Israelis see enough merit in attacking a full-blooded Iranian nuclear facility? And if they do, how may Tehran respond? The moot point is, what will it take to force Israel to climb off the escalation ladder, especially after Tuesday's barrage of rocket attacks, which included more than 180 rocket strikes at major Israeli cities like Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Fortunately, only one individual, a Palestinian resident in the West Bank, has been killed in the Iran rocket barrage. The big uncertainty is around Iran's nuclear weapons program. Iran's nuclear program has evolved significantly since its inception in the 1950s, initially aimed at peaceful production of energy. However, over the last few decades, it has developed capabilities which raise concerns about potential nuclear weaponization. The geopolitical landscape surrounding Iran's nuclear ambitions is complex, particularly in the wake of recent tensions between Israel, Hamas, and now, of course, Hezbollah and Iran. Iran possesses a range of technologies related to nuclear weapons, particularly uranium enrichment and ballistic missile capabilities. Following the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action of the JCPOA in 2015, Iran had agreed to limit its nuclear activities in exchange for relief from American sanctions. However, the US withdrawal from that JCPOA in 2018, when Donald Trump was president, led to a resumption of Iran enriching uranium. Reports even indicating that Iran has enriched uranium to almost weapons grade. This new situation raises questions about Iran's intentions and also its potential future consequences. The recent death of Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of the Hezbollah terror group, could provoke a range of responses from Iran. While some analysts speculate that Iran might consider using a nuclear weapon as a form of retaliation, this scenario remains largely hypothetical. The use of nuclear weapons would not only escalate the conflict into a realm that's not been seen before in the Middle East, it would also invite severe international repercussions and perhaps even isolation for Iran. The strategic calculus for Tehran would likely weigh the risks of nuclear engagement against the potential benefits. The world community plays a crucial role in ensuring that Iran does not cross the nuclear red lines. So here is what it can do. Continuous diplomatic engagement through dialogue with platforms like the P5+1, it can help manage tensions and encourage compliance with international norms laid out by the IAEA. Also, the IAEA conducts regular inspections to verify compliance with nuclear agreements. That is something that Iran can agree to. Enhanced monitoring can deter any illegal activities. Economic sanctions serve as a deterrent against nuclear proliferation. The reimposition of sanctions can occur swiftly if any violations are detected. Several scenarios could unfold vis-a-vis Iran's nuclear ambitions and how it chooses to respond the current moment of tense ties with Tel Aviv. If Iran continues to enrich uranium beyond its permissible limits, it may reach a point where it can produce a nuclear weapon. Diplomatic efforts could lead to a renewed agreement very similar to the JCPOA, which would reimpose the sanctions and the restrictions on Iran's nuclear activities. An attack on Iranian nuclear facilities, whether it's by Israel or America or any of the regional powers, that could provoke retaliatory fire from Iran, and that could potentially escalate into a broader conflict. The number one priority for the Iranian regime is to protect its nuclear program. Should Iran acquire or use a nuclear weapon, then the regional dynamics would shift rather dramatically. A nuclear-capable Iran would likely embolden its stand against Israel. That could potentially lead to preemptive military actions by Israel. Countries like Saudi Arabia may feel compelled to develop their own nuclear capabilities to counterbalance Iran, and that could lead to an arms race in the region. As an ally of Iran, Hezbollah could gain increased leverage in its confrontations with Israel, and that would further destabilize not just Lebanon but also Israel. If Iran were to use a nuclear weapon, then the consequences would be profound, it would be far-reaching, it would impact regional stability and in fact even the overall dynamics of the Middle East. The immediate aftermath of the nuclear strike would likely involve severe military retaliation from Israel, possibly dragging in the United States. Given Israel's military superiority and its own nuclear capabilities, like a response could lead to a full-scale war in the region, and that could draw in neighboring countries like Jordan, Iraq, Syria, and potentially ignite a broader conflict. Iran's use of a nuclear weapon would also likely trigger an arms race in the Middle East. Countries like Saudi Arabia and Egypt might pursue their own nuclear capabilities, with some help, of course, from the United States. This proliferation of nuclear weapons would significantly increase the risk for future conflicts, including for both Israel and Iran. But it could also have far-reaching consequences in a way that it could reshape the entire Middle East. Iran's actions could alter existing alliances within the region. Gulf states may seek closer ties with Washington as well as with Tel Aviv. They would require some form of security guarantees. It could also lead to shifts in regional power dynamics. The use of a nuclear weapon would lead to a severe political and economic repercussion for Iran. Major powers, including China and Russia, which is antagonistic to the United States and to Israel, so far they've been cautious in their dealings with Tehran. They would likely distance themselves from Iran, and that will result in increased sanctions and isolation for Tehran. A nuclear strike would also result in catastrophic humanitarian consequences, including mass casualties and long-term health effects. The international community would face immense pressure to respond. But that's not all. The disruption of oil supplies from the Gulf region could also lead to skyrocketing oil prices and global economic instability. The Strait of Hormuz, which is a critical choke point for all transport and all traffic through the sea lanes, any conflict could severely impact global energy markets and particularly global transportation and commerce. That would have severe down the line consequences, particularly for major oil consumers like China and India. The prospect of Iran utilizing nuclear weapons remains fraught with uncertainty and rather perilous implications. While immediate reactions to the events of Nasrallah's death and the surrounding dramatic consequences we've seen in the region, it suggests a degree of aggressive posturing by Iran, given the rocket attacks, but the broader strategic environment is very much shaky. The international community must remain vigilant, it must remain proactive in diplomatic efforts to try and prevent any form of escalation. The fundamental thing is that both Israel and Iran are made to ensure that nuclear red lines are respected. The interplay between military capabilities on the one hand, political alliances, and international oversight will shape the future trajectory of Iran's nuclear ambitions and, more importantly, how Israel responds to those nuclear ambitions. All right, so it's not a question of if, but when and how Israel will retaliate. Let's try and make some sense of this story because it's going to have down the line repercussions, not just for that region, but here in India, the subcontinent, the wider world. And the big question everybody's asking is, depending on the nature of that response from Israel, can both countries pull themselves from the brink, or are we simply now climbing up the escalation ladder? I'm now joined by Dana Stroll. She's a research director with the Washington Institute and also former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense. Thank you very much, Ms. Stroll, for speaking with us. First things first. So I was paraphrasing what the Israeli ambassador told me yesterday, that Israel reserves the right to retaliate. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when and in what form and shape that retaliation will take. What is your best assessment of how Israel might retaliate?
Well, thanks so much for having me today. I think for Israeli security leaders, they feel that they have to respond. If you look at the events earlier this year in April, Iran launched a direct attack on Israel. That time it was drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles. The Biden administration urged Israel to take the win and not respond. Israel did respond, but it found a way to do it where it didn't cause massive collateral damage, did not cause civilian casualties, and did not devastate a lot of Iran's infrastructure. This time, we saw Iran launch hundreds of ballistic missiles at Israel. We know some of them did impact inside Israeli territory, and it's hard to see a situation in which Israel does not respond. The question is, do they respond in such a way that there's an off-ramp to de-escalation and return to diplomacy? Or do they feel that because there were so many impacts inside Israel, they also need to respond with a much larger kind of strike?
So the question then is, what shape or form will that retaliation take? Is it going to be the nuclear facilities, which President Biden, I believe, has said he will not be supportive of? Is it going to be the oil installations? Again, I'm not sure if America and Israel are on the same page on that strategy. Or is it going to be taking out one of the leaders, perhaps in the IRGC, or one of the military leaders? How will this play out? Again, what's your best guess in this regard?
I agree with you. I think President Biden was very clear that he didn't wish to see the nuclear program of Iran attacked. And that's probably because, one, there is no very short, quick military option that eliminates this very dangerous nuclear program. And two, Iran is already at such a close threshold to deciding to go for a nuclear weapon that those kinds of actions might actually change the thinking of Iran's senior leaders. Then there's the question of the energy infrastructure. And even though President Biden was ambiguous about this yesterday, this is a terrible time in the presidential election cycle when Americans and the rest of the world are so focused on stability in global energy markets. Taking an action like this, I think, would reverberate far beyond the message that Israel wants to send directly to Iran's senior leaders. President Biden also said we want to see a proportionate strike. That probably means since Iran targeted military installations in Israel and there were not civilian casualties and there was not massive collateral damage, that Washington wants to see something like that. Military installations, one set of strikes, and not major collateral damage or civilian casualties. So I think the Israeli senior leaders are using this period of the Jewish holidays to design a strike that shows they're going to move further than they did in their response in April, but not one that causes a further escalation pattern where Iran feels it needs to respond again.
There are some folks in Israel, and I think it's been best captured by the tweet that was put out by former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, saying that this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity, a once-in-a-50-year opportunity, and they want to go for some form of regime change in Iran. It also speaks to, in some ways, what Prime Minister Netanyahu said a few days ago to the Iranian people. How easy or difficult would that be? Is it just a pipe dream? Is this psyops that they're trying to do? Because the Iranian regime seems much more layered and fortified than any other regime in that region.
There certainly is a lot of information warfare going on, excuse me, both from Israel and from Iran. Here's the difference now than at any other time in the decades-long conflict between Israel and Iran. Israel's managed to take out Iran's primary insurance, which is Hezbollah in Lebanon. There was always thinking that in a situation in which Israel chose to attack Iran or Iran wanted to escalate against Israel, the challenge is that Hezbollah, with all of its missiles, its missile arsenal closer to Israel, would rain down thousands of missiles and attacks on Israel every single day. Excuse me. Straining Israel's ability to both defend itself so close to home and sustain a campaign as far away as Iran. But now that insurance policy is completely decimated with the actions we've seen Israel take in Lebanon. And we know that a lot of the other Iranian proxies like Hamas are also militarily degraded. So the Israelis see an opportunity right now to do massive damage when a lot of the ways in which Iran might retaliate are diminished. I do think that's an overly simplistic way of understanding the situation, though, in the sense that the Iranian regime and what it would take to really force regime change is not just about decapitating the senior leadership. It's not just about taking out the nuclear program. It's about societal change. And that is not something that you can do with one strike or even three strikes.
And if that is the case, and just as you outlined, the two big sort of proxies who are up against Israel, whether it was Hamas in the south or Hezbollah in the north, they have been sort of militarily debilitated to a great extent. In fact, the ambassador yesterday said that he doesn't believe that Hamas is in a position, at least in the foreseeable future, to be able to launch another October 7th style attack. You were saying that Hezbollah has been significantly dealt a heavy blow. Why doesn't Israel then take those two as the wins, as President Biden said back in April, instead of escalating this by directly targeting Iran or directly retaliating against Iran?
It's a great question. So first of all, in the case of Hamas, there's still enough of Hamas left to be holding at least 100 Israeli hostages alive. And so far, there does not seem to be an opening for agreement from Hamas for a ceasefire that could release those hostages. When it comes to Hezbollah in Lebanon, the estimates are that the Israelis have been successful in taking out the majority of Hezbollah senior leaderships, but only half of its missile and weapons arsenal. So the view from Israel is that there's still significant work to do. And when it comes to Iran, where there's a view that Iran is the origin of the destabilization, terrorism, and instability we see across the entire Middle East, even though its insurance policy and all of these non-state groups it's cultivated have been weakened, they're not eliminated. And Iran's ballistic missile arsenal, its drone arsenal, its nuclear weapons program 1 week away from crossing the nuclear threshold, and its senior leadership committed to the elimination of the state of Israel still exist. So the Israelis now see this strategic opportunity to set back Iran even further.
I do want to know your thoughts, though, on what seems like, at least on the face of it, in public utterances, that the American leadership and the Israeli leadership are not quite on the same page. Every time President Biden said something, he said ceasefire, it's going to be a year, we haven't had a ceasefire in Gaza. He said Israel must do more to protect the civilians, 40,000 plus are dead. Again, I don't see Israel doing much trying to protect the civilians. He said they shouldn't invade via ground into Lebanon. Israel's done exactly that. And now he's saying do not directly attack Iran. And it's likely, more likely that that Israel will retaliate against Iran directly rather than not. So is that just that that Mr. Netanyahu is just going to do whatever he feels like is in Israel's best interest, and he doesn't really care about what the Biden presidency is saying or what President Biden is saying, because he's made the calculation that this is, for all practical purposes, a lame duck president?
So I think that's actually a misreading of what's going on right now. The Biden administration has been surprisingly forward-leaning in supporting what Israel's doing. So, for example, yesterday, the State Department was quite clear that it supports the limited ground incursions that Israel's undertaking in southern Lebanon to clean out Hezbollah fighters, tunnels, and weapons caches that are so close to Israel's border that there's no way its civilians could return to their homes in northern Israel unless that threat is eliminated. And now, after the direct Iranian attack on Israel, the Biden administration has warned of severe consequences, that it supports an Israeli response. It just wants to see it done in a measured, proportionate way that does not escalate into an even bigger, large-scale war. But actually, there's not that much daylight here. President Biden supports Israeli military action, and what they're actually saying is there's no country that should accept the kinds of attacks Hezbollah has rained down on Israel since October 8th, that Hamas inflicted on Israel in its terrorist attack on October 7th, or what Iran did just a few days ago with over 180 ballistic missiles. The President Biden is backing Israel in a response. He just wants to see it done in a manner that then offers opportunities for diplomacy on the other side.
Dana, one final question very quickly, though. Best case scenario, worst case scenario in Israel's response. And I presume it would happen as early as next week.
The best case scenario is that there is a measured, proportionate response that does not cause such collateral damage or civilian casualties inside Iran that the regime feels threatened in such a way that it must respond in an even larger way than what we just saw, and you're in an escalatory tit-for-tat cycle. The best case scenario, the best case scenario is that there's an off-ramp. The worst case scenario is that the Israeli strikes are so expansive and so destructive that it either seriously destabilizes the global economy, energy markets, causes changes in Iranian nuclear decision-making, or such a massive Iranian response that citizens across the entire region in Gulf countries and countries that host U.S. bases also come under threat.
All right, Hassan Nasrallah, thank you very much for speaking with us here on CNN News 18, and thank you for your time and your thoughts and perspective. So Iran has now ratcheted up the attack against Israel by involving in a direct attack against Israel, a barrage of over 100 rockets at Israel over a 45-minute period on Tuesday night. The question is, how will Israel respond? It's not anymore about if it will, because it has no choice but to respond and to be seen as responding. But more importantly, what may be the outcome of it? What may be the objective now in Israel's mind? Because can the region, and can indeed the entire world, afford for a wider regional and perhaps a direct confrontation between Tel Aviv and Tehran? Alex Vatanka is an Iran specialist. He's from the Middle East Institute in Washington. He's now joining us. Thank you very much, Mr. Vatanka. I do want to ask you, like I said at the start of this program, this is a question now of how Israel is going to respond. Do you think there's an option at all that Israel does not respond?
Well, that is certainly an option, but that's not the one we are hearing from Israeli officials. Here, media in the United States quoting Israeli officials are telling us that Israel is planning, quote, a massive retaliation against Iran that might include oil facilities, nuclear sites, and other strategic sites in Iran. Obviously, it's early days. We have to wait and see what the actual Israeli reaction will be and whether some of the things that we've heard will turn out to be true or not. And I have to also add quickly that the Iranian side has said that they too will retaliate in kind. And final point I make, which is something that all of us internationally need to worry about, is that Iran has said that if their nuclear facilities or oil facilities are struck, they will take out targets in the region, not limiting themselves to Israel. And that means potentially the conflict will spill out into the region and beyond Israel and Iran.
I do want to ask you, though, how easy or difficult would it be for Israel to target the nuclear facilities in Iran? Even back in April, from whatever I understand, they did attack the periphery of a nuclear facility. They didn't attack the actual, the central part of it. How easy or difficult would that be?
Look, we have to assume at this point that the Israelis have clearly the intelligence upper hand. In other words, they know so much about who's who, what is what inside of Iran, and I'm sure that includes all the strategic sites, including nuclear facilities. So they have the intelligence. They do have one of the best air forces in the world. Do they have the capacity to undertake an operation on that scale? Because Iran's nuclear facilities are not one or two sites. They are spread out across a large country, 3 times the size of France. So you can imagine that the Israelis might not have the capacity on their own to, finish the job, if you will, if that's what they end up doing. And that raises a bigger question. Will the United States help Israel in such an effort? Now, I have to say, sitting here in Washington, D.C., I do not hear anything that suggests to me that the United States is interested in right now to take out Iran's nuclear facilities. If that's being planned, they're keeping it very quiet in the White House.
I'll come to the question of the U.S. and the U.S.'s role, or the non-role, some would say, in just one second. But I do want to get your thoughts on, something that happened before the Iranian attack Tuesday night, which was a video clip that was put out by Benjamin Netanyahu speaking directly to the Iranian people, urging them to change the regime. Again, how easy or difficult would that be? Because I'm sure you must have seen Naftali Bennett, a former Israeli Prime Minister, his tweet suggesting that this is an opportunity that's come once in 50 years where Israel can actually change the regime in Iran, take out the Ayatollahs, and then allow the Iranian people to determine their own political system.
Look, let me answer that question 2 ways. Number one is, Iran is a pretty formidable country. It's an unpopular regime, no doubt about it. Vast majority of Iranians are against this Islamist system that has ruled in Iran for the last 45 years. I don't think anybody will dispute that. But it is still a pretty formidable state in terms of its agency, in terms of being able to sort of defend itself, if you will, and the regime. Just to give you a comparison, it's got it's about 80 times larger than Israel. It's got 10 times the size of the population of Israel. So the idea that Israel can bring about regime change just because it wants to, that's more a sort of wishful thinking than reality. But again, this could be what the Israelis decide to turn into their strategic objective. Instead of fighting Iran in the various arenas in the region, in Lebanon, in Gaza, elsewhere, that Israel comes out with this policy essentially of regime change, saying to its allies like the United States, like the Europeans, that look, if you want sustainable stability in the Middle East going forward, you have to come along with me on this journey, which needs to be evolving around a central mission, that is to bring the regime in Tehran down. Again, you can defend that sort of a policy as a policy, but how you implement it, that's a whole different matter, and it's not as easy as it might sound.
I do want to ask you about the role of the U.S., particularly the Biden White House. For many months, they were pursuing a ceasefire. That didn't come to pass. Then you had this whole thing where they said, we want to limit this conflict to Gaza. Now it's spread to Lebanon. It's spread possibly into a direct conflict between Iran and Israel. And then, of course, there's this whole thing that Netanyahu is seemingly doing whatever he feels like. Is it because he's made the calculation that the Biden White House is pretty much now a lame duck presidency? Or does he want to sort of force some kind of a positive outcome for Israel, perhaps before the next occupant of the White House?
I don't know. All I can tell you in terms of the Biden administration, there are probably many more here who have questions about their performance. President Biden has repeatedly promised ceasefire and putting pressure on all parties to de-escalate, and nobody's listening to the White House. It's not good for American credibility when that happens. So I think and you see that, by the way, as a message being debated now in this election season in the United States, with the Republicans saying that nobody's taking America seriously anymore. To your point about whether Prime Minister Netanyahu wants to start something before the U.S. election in November to sort of make it, inevitable for the United States to have no choice but to back Israel. That is probably something the Iranians are thinking is perhaps an Israeli calculation. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But I think for sure, whatever the truth here is, both Iran and Israel are paying close attention to where America stands on this issue of tensions in the Middle East, because it really, in fact, shapes, obviously, much of
At l'oreille.
هذا العقاب آت حتما بإذن الله تعالى، ولن نتحدث كثيرا فالكلام غدا لسيد ولكن حتما بإذن الله تعالى ولن نتحدث كثيرا فالكلام غدا لسيد
Viewers, it was meant to be a day to assuage the sentiments of crores of Hindus. At least that's what the Supreme Court said today when it ruled to constitute an SIT or a special investigation team led by the CBI director to investigate claims that the laddus in Tirumala Tirupati temple had been adulterated with beef tallow, pig fat and fish oil. The decision by the Supreme Court is a vindication for those who had gone public with laboratory reports pointing to an alleged foul act of sacrilege that has the potential to shake the belief of crores of Hindus in their religious institutions. Viewers, if you thought that finally someone was addressing your concerns and that it would